Well, hey everyone, this is Matthew and Elisa Berry with Jesus Following Network, and we're really excited tonight to start a series of conversations. And the topic of the conversation is, what is the church's role in reconciliation? Reconciliation, racial reconciliation, these are terms that have been sort of brought to the forefront, at least in our Christian communities, and I think also sort of at a broader scale across our nation, just because of some of the recent events that sort of began with George Floyd's tragic death, but really precede this. This is not the first event that has really brought this about, but we wanted to leverage this this season to have some conversations. And I'm really excited to be joined tonight with a friend of mine and coworker, Tim Robinson. So Tim, it's great to have you on here.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Awesome. So in our community, one of our three major values is to be kind to all people, and kindness really manifests itself in a lot of different ways, but one of the ways is
sorry.
that's okay. One of the ways is silencing your phone. No,
yes.
But one of the ways that we manifest kindness, we act in kindness, is by giving people a voice and by listening first instead of talking first. And so I just want to introduce Tim Robinson. Tim, do you want to give us just a little bit of background on who you are, where you live, and
Sure.
Yeah, just introduce yourself.
So I'm Tim Robinson. Thanks, man. Thanks for having me on here. This is anytime I can hang out, with people of God. It's just a great time. So a little bit about me. I'll start with I'm a 40-something-year-old. I hail from Louisiana, born and raised in Louisiana. Currently, I reside in Stafford, Virginia, which is probably about 25 miles south of Washington, D.C. I have a wife and two daughters, Tamia and Taylor. My wife is Shima. She's actually in the church behind me, leading praise and worship practice for tonight. A little bit about me and what I like to do, I guess. I'm an outdoors type of guy. Again, born and raised in Louisiana. So I like to hunt, I like to fish, all sorts of those things. And I'll say this, I spent most of my adult life in the Marine Corps. So I'm a retired Marine. So that's an interesting tidbit. Currently just serve in cybersecurity. Really interesting. I don't, how people are like, hey, you're a Marine and now you're a cybersecurity guy. How did that happen? That's another long story for a different time. Again, Matt, Alyssa, thanks for having me on. Just an honor to be here.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, it's also it's fun to watch your Facebook, because for those of you who don't know Tim, when he goes and does anything outdoors, he takes a GoPro and straps it onto his chest. And so it's fun to, I sort of feel like vicariously I've caught some bass with you by watching the videos. So that's really cool. the merger of outdoors and tech.
Yeah, I know, it's interesting. That's exactly what it is. My wife was like, why are you taking the camera out with you? I'm like, because I want to take the world with me. So a little bit about that, I started a YouTube channel. And it's a very small YouTube channel. It's called Tim is Outdoors. So Tim is Outdoors. So I do things like walk through the woods, save animals. It's really a ride, man. I just started it 2 months ago when I got that GoPro as a gift. So I'm going to keep on taking people on adventures, man.
That's awesome. Well, from what I've known of Tim in the time that we have worked together, Tim is a very wise person, also a very kind person, and somebody that I really respect. And so we wanted to have him on this first of our series of talks. And Tim, I guess the first question that I wanted to pose to you is, just briefly, what's your take on the climate today and recent events that have occurred sort of beginning most recently with George Floyd, but obviously, there have been other things that are
Sure.
coming up to that.
Sure, man. I got to tell you, it's a really hard question to answer because there's just so many emotions wrapped up with what's going on. But what I will say I'm happy about is people are starting to take notice, right? About the things that not just the Black community, but any community of color, or if I like to use the term Black American, Asian American, Mexican American. These people are American, right? But they identify with other things in their life. So I don't want to detract from if somebody wanted to say that I'm African American, right? So just want to throw it out there. But I think for the most part, I think there's heightened awareness. People are more receptive to listening now. It's something that we've been talking about for ages, right? Something as simple as the Confederate flag, right? That's you can argue all day long until you're blue in the face about what it means to you, but you also need to listen and be empathetic about what it means to me, right, and others. So I'm really happy and proud of our nation for coming together and seeing that there's more to this than just people complaining, right? That there are real issues that we have to deal with, right? And we have to start somewhere. And I don't want to, I don't want to get too far into our conversation, but I just wanted to highlight that, that there's a lot going on, a lot of emotions, a lot of people are dealing with things that I don't personally deal with. And I'll share this. At work, we're having what's called listening sessions. And I'm in these listening sessions like, wow, people are really having a hard time. And things that I would not have even imagined. I don't have sons, I have two daughters. So I don't worry about them as much as some of these other people that I work with day to day worry about, especially, if they're single moms. Those are the ones who my heart aches for when they have sons, right? Because they're like, I don't know if he's ever going to come home. I'm trying to come to work today, but I'm also worried about him because he's going to work today. So it really is amazing what people do go through. And again, I'm just happy that people are starting to take notice and listen. I think we need to focus now on follow through, right? You talked about George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Arbery. A lot of incidents have happened, and a lot of times we'll see an incident happen. We'll come together as a nation, and things will, people start to take notice. People start putting programs in place, and then within 2 months things will die off, and then a year, 2 years later, we find ourselves back here again dealing with things like police brutality, right? So I just have a heart for this nation. I am happy that we are making changes, especially with the law enforcement community, with racism, sexism. You name something and put ism on the end. We're now listening as a nation, and that makes me really proud.
That's cool. Thanks, Tim. A couple of weeks ago when Elisa and I, we were on a family vacation, and so I had a little bit of extra time to think, and I was scrolling through Facebook, and sometimes social media can be both good and like tragically bad.
Right.
I was just getting so tired of I was seeing so much content, so many people talking about the things that you just mentioned, and I just found myself realizing, I need a different perspective. I need a perspective of somebody who, has been involved in this issue for a long time, has some well thought out opinions, and so I bought a book on Kindle called One Blood by John Perkins, who is now, I think he's 90 years old.
Yeah.
Something like that. Grew up in Mississippi, a black pastor. And he has really been, at least maybe not the leader, but he's been a voice, a consistent voice, advocating for reconciliation and, the breaking down of barriers that exist. And I just want to sort of kick it off with one quote that I saw, but then I wanted to ask you, Lisa, maybe just some initial thoughts that you had about the book, because I think all of us have read it at different levels. But if there's one quote that John Perkins said that really stood out to me, it's this. He said that the problem of reconciliation in our country and in our churches is much too big to be wrestled to the ground by plans that begin in the minds of men. I just want to say that one more time, because it's sort of wordy, but I think it's really deep. That the problem of reconciliation in our country and in our churches is much too big to be wrestled to the ground by plans that begin in the minds of men. And I think he went on to talk about how the church, the people of God, really have an opportunity to really lead in terms of these conversations and reconciliation and honoring one another. So that's just me, like something that stood out to me to kick things off. But Elisa, what do you think? And then we'll turn it over to Tim.
Yeah, I had really been just feeling really disturbed and really grieved about all the events that have been taking place. And quite honestly, like a lot of it was new to me, just because of the circle, we live in the country, and like the people that we know, and I've just really been thinking about it and wanting to change the way that I act, and wanting to, I know that I can't control what other people do, but I can change and I can do something differently. And there was a couple of things that stood out to me. One, like just that we are one race. There is no such thing as more than one different race. We are, and so even the idea of racial reconciliation is now just so annoying to me, because that whole term was even formulated to justify
race
slavery. That's what it. Yeah. So it's like, I don't even want to use that anymore. But as a Christian, as a follower of Jesus, I think that, here's a quote. He says, this is from John Perkins, there has been the suggestion that we can be reconciled to God without being reconciled to our brothers and sisters in Christ. And basically what he's saying, like, that's not possible. We can't say, it even says in the Bible, like, you can't say that you love God. If you say that you love God, but you don't love your brother, you're a liar. So I've just been thinking about just really desiring that as Christians, we could follow a different path. And I agree with what you said, Matthew, that I don't think the world has this figured out. And I don't think they ever will. I really do believe that the answer lies in the power of God and in Jesus. Like he is going to show us a different way. And I think from the little that I know, I think it has to do with relationship, with love, with honor. But I want to listen. I want to learn, and I want to change some things that I'm doing so that I can contribute to, helping to contribute to healing, instead of just sort of throwing it onto someone else.
Right. That's an interesting take. But before I get into what I was going to say, what I got out of the book, I want to take you guys back to a story. My wife and I were talking about race relations, and this had to be about 10 years ago. We were joking because we're at a party, and my wife's fair complected. She has a fair complexion, and people were like, hey, what ethnic background are you? And my wife was taken aback, and she just said Bowendian, and I was like, what was that? Pull it to the side. What was that? She's like, well, I had to think on my feet, and I like to think of myself as black, white, and Indian, right? So she made up a race, like right off the cuff. I was like, okay, that's good. And we sort of pulled a thread on that, and I think we both, resolved to the fact that in a few years, in the near future, probably before Jesus come back, I don't know, but to your point about the one race, the racial lines are going to be blurred, that everybody's just going to be one color, right? You're seeing the proliferation now, or just the introduction now of more interracial couples. And to your point, Elisa, I don't think God meant for us to put those labels on us. Probably the worst thing we've done as a world is to apply a race, to the color of your skin, right? We're all people, and I know we don't want to go Old Testament and talk about who's in the Old Testament, but the bottom line is I think we've done ourselves a disservice by introducing the topic of your race, you're black, you're white, you're whatever the case may be. That was just a sort of a sidebar. Reading the book opened my eyes. I was like, this guy is 90 years old. I'm like, I want to read all this other stuff, right? Because a lot of this is, to me, it made perfect sense. I think my favorite chapter of the book was number 5, where he talked about forgiveness, and he talked about it's in our DNA. And I talk about my family a lot, so you guys got to bear with me. One of the things that God has blessed me with was the ability to forgive. Like, my wife and I could be fighting, or I could be fighting with my friends, or whatever the case may be. And the next 5 minutes after the argument, I'm good. I'm like, I love you, and I'm out. I'm done. There's no offense. Nothing is on my heart. But I think he hit the nail on the head when he said forgiveness is the linchpin to reconciliation. So much like what both of you were saying, there's a left and right limit of how you want to get there, and if you can't forgive, then there won't be any reconciliation, no matter what we do. And even if that forgiveness means forgive yourself for not educating yourself appropriately about the things that are happening in this world. I'm guilty, right? I have 2 daughters. I didn't really train them up on racism, and and they came home, hey, it wasn't like, what's a slave? It was like, hey, what's going on with this, Dad? And I'm like, you know what? You're right. I probably should have spent a little bit more time developing you so that when you get into this environment, that you will be more apt to be able to navigate or negotiate your way around those conversations should they happen. So, and I think I've shared this before with you, Matt. For me, the way I know if a family is racist or not, or have sort of, I would say, questionable tendencies is to look at their children, right? So if your children behave in a certain way, I know that they're not exposed to what they should be exposed to in a godly way. And again, no judgment here, but for me, I had to judge myself and come to the fact that, hey, Tim, you've done some things wrong with raising your children. Like my children, let's face it, they're rich kids, right? We live in a big old house, 14-acre land. They don't have a care in the world. They want something, they get. So they're really shielded from a lot of what's going on in the world. And I sort of had to, take a hard look at myself and realize that, hey, man, there's an educational piece that they need to have. Now, the flip side to that is, my Caucasian friends are the same way. They're like, oh, shoot, man, I need to tell my kids as well what's going on, because it's going to start in the home. So circling back to reconciliation and forgiveness, I had to forgive myself for not being training my kids up to be able to deal with these sorts of racial relations. My kids know everything there is to know about, Pokemon and Disney Channel and all that. But there's a whole other world that I had to, reconcile with myself, get my heart right, and be able to have those challenging conversations with them, because the world isn't what they always think, and I want to be able to prepare them. I hope that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I have a question for you. Do you think that our differences much more, we do have differences, but do you think that they could be more cultural than anything else? Because, I'm very different from a lot of people. Not just people with black skin. But don't you think like a lot of what we're dealing with is like we need to learn to honor one another with like the differences in culture that we have? We don't have to change and be like that person. We can just appreciate the way that they are. I don't know. What's your thought on that?
I think so. I do think, there's a low tolerance in a lot of cultures. And again, I don't mean to condemn anybody or point the finger at anybody, but let's face it, we are very judgmental. Like, when I have, and here's a perfect example, like I started growing my hair a month and a half ago, whatever, 2 months ago. People look at me differently now. Right? It's kind of weird. I think I posted on Facebook that I was, walking through the airport, and people were like, is that guy Black Panther? That type of thing, right? So it's pretty funny. But when I'm clean shaven, I don't get the same type of looks. But I think our differences our differences make us who we are. I think we need to learn to be more tolerant and just have the mindset that I want to learn more about your culture rather than sort of appropriate it, or rather than sort of, look at it in a negative way. We're different because God made us different, right? And there's no way around it. I mean, again, I'll put my wife and me in the same scenario. Like, she won't even go outside. If my wife never had to go outside, she wouldn't go outside, like, at all. She won't even answer the door. Like, she will not answer the door. Like, and homebody, introverted, IT person, will not talk to you and be completely fine. I'm outside at 7 o'clock in the morning running around in the woods. It's just like two completely different people. And we just had to resolve to that and reconcile within each other that, hey, you're a much completely different person than I am. And we left it at that. So I think a lot of that needs to happen outside of different races and cultures. And I know I keep saying races. I hate the term different races because we're all one people, but that's what I mean.
Ethnicities.
Yeah.
Ethnicity.
I want to go back to that quote that you mentioned, Tim, because I think it's worth mentioning again that forgiveness is the linchpin of reconciliation. It's the soil in which reconciliation takes root and grows. And we're sort of leading into the next question. We're not quite there yet, but the next question is, how ought the church to respond in this season? But my understanding of reconciliation is different than asking somebody to apologize for something. I think that sometimes they can be sort of confused. So a few years ago, we went to a marriage retreat, which was actually like the one marriage retreat that was like phenomenal. I've been to some that have just been like totally bogus.
Like, what is it?
Just love one another and say you're sorry. But,
hold hands.
But what I loved about this marriage retreat is they talked about how reconciliation really has nothing to do with whether you were right or wrong. Like, usually, and we use some of these tools with our kids. Like, one kid offends.
We came home from that retreat and we put those kids, like, we pulled out that tool and we were just like, from now on, this is how we're doing it.
This is how we're doing it. Well, because I had to do it. So if I have to do it, my kids are going to have to do it, right?
There you go.
My wife's going to check on one kid here real quick. But here's the deal. Most of the time, and you know this, Tim, like when one kid gets upset at the other kid, they offend one another, you usually say, the way I was raised is you say, say you're sorry. And the one kid's like, right. Sorry, and you can tell they really don't mean it. They don't mean it, right? But in this marriage retreat, they talked about how reconciliation is more about giving the other person a voice and letting them know that they have been heard, and then responding to the way that they felt. So, our kids, one offends the other, and we say, okay, like the one kid has to say, well, when I treated you that way, how did I make you feel? And the person, person who's offended says, well, when you did that, it made me feel unloved, right? And then the offender says, well, it makes me sad that I made you feel unloved. And in the future, I'm gonna, will you forgive me? But it's much more. It's much more than just saying sorry. It's giving the other person a voice, and it's giving them the validation that they've been heard. And I think that
Sure.
that's something that definition of reconciliation might be something that's sort of missing in our culture. Like, we just hear reconciliation and like, what does it mean? And I think, to me, reconciliation means giving somebody a voice and letting them know that they've been heard. Even if I personally haven't done anything wrong. Like, you Tim, you've been married, and there's sometimes like,
Yep.
you have the best intentions, but you stepped on a landmine.
Like, I think somebody told me, it's sometimes, even when you're right, you're wrong. And even when you're right, sometimes you have to, I don't want to say take the high road, but sometimes you have to just be wrong. You know what I mean? Hey, I get it. Okay, just take the loss and move on. It's not like that all the time.
Taking the low road. Take the low
road.
like, right?
Yeah.
Humbling yourself.
The funny thing is, I found we've been married for over 20 years, right? And I can give you that story. That's a hilarious story. Matter of fact, let's just go into it. So, all right, let's go into that story. So I met my wife at Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech, I can distinctly remember this summer, mid-90s. They were having I went to summer school because, I had to get my, I was in the Marine Corps, off the fight, and came back. So they were like, hey, you got to go to summer school to get back in the mindset of going to school with people. So at Virginia Tech, I didn't know this. I just picked it because they had a Corps Cadets. It was in the country, in the mountains. I love outdoors, so I picked Virginia Tech. When I got there, they had a party because there was their 1,000th black person at the school. You got to think, Virginia Tech, they're like 40,000 students, and they were having a party. Hey, we got 1,000 black kids. Woo! It was awesome. So that was the environment in which I met my wife. First day of class, I went to, I think it was Business Advanced Systems or something like that. It was a big, huge auditorium. I came from Faraday, Louisiana. My high school was like, 500 people. There were 500 students in this class when I walked in. And I looked up, just shell-shocked. It was all white kids, a couple Asian kids, and then there's me. So I'm looking, sheepishly scanning where am I going to sit down. And then I saw a hand pop up, and it was like, hey, and it was my wife, and I was like, hey.
That's so cute.
I walked up and I sat with her, and I kid you not, we're the only African-American students in that major in management science and information technology for the whole 4 years we were at Virginia Tech. We took every class together. So literally my destiny was there that first day because I was so shell-shocked that there were so many white kids, and I found that one black kid in the audience. And when we found each other, and I went sit with her, and we've been together literally ever since that day. So that's a story about my wife and I. I have no clue where I was going before this, but that's the story of how we got together.
That's cool. So I guess the next question I have is, in this climate, there's a lot of people in groups trying to tell us how we should respond, like during this, it's sort of prescribing, you need to do this or do that. And I'm just wondering for you guys, like, what do you guys think we as people who follow Jesus, we consider ourselves part of the church, like the big C church, not like an individual church, but like as sort of a collective people of faith. How are we supposed to, what are some ways that we should be responding like in this season?
Lisa, no. Tim, you go first.
Oh, geez, that's a good question, man. I think and this may sound simple, but just do something. so many times, man. And I've seen this. You know, there's an issue, and people are just so passive about it, right? We're the church. We should probably be the most vocal organization out there about, whether it's, people being treated unfairly, people being discriminated against. We should be, we call it in the Marine Corps the tip of the spear. The church should be the tip of the spear. And I think Mr. Perkins, talks about it a lot. We need to get ourselves together. The church should be vocal out front talking about this. So the very first thing I would say is do something. Don't just let people live in a world where they think the church doesn't care or the church is ineffective in doing anything. And I think to me, I get offended when churches don't do anything or when they speak out of line. And that's a whole nother conversation for another day. But we're personally going through a series at our church. It's basically it basically tells us about how to defeat racism biblically, from a biblical standpoint. So that's what we're going through. I currently, peruse YouTube a lot, and I do watch a lot of online pastors. Stephen Furtick, he has Elevation Church, huge following. He hit it nail on the head. Hey, he brought I think it was John Gray in. He brought in T.D. Jakes in, and he talked about it. They sat down and they talked about race relations. And you know what? And they did it unashamedly. They did it, and I was like, wow. Even at the risk of, and I'm just going to be honest. People probably don't care about this, but a lot of times you have people in the church will stop going if you talk about specific things, like women's rights or the Confederate flag. People will stop coming to church and stop participating, paying tithes, offers, or whatever the case may be, because you brought up those very harsh topics to talk about, right? And that shows that, and to me, that shows where your heart is as a Christian, right? So bringing up and talking about racism offends you, that should tell you something right there. It should tell you that you probably need to check your heart, because just because you don't like talking about it, that doesn't mean that somebody else isn't going through it and don't need your voice, or don't need a gentle hand on the back to say, hey, I know things are hard. I'm here. I had you, Matt. You contacted me. Thank you for that. There's a few people that I know that are white that contacted me. Hey, Tim, are you okay? What's going on? I just want to make sure everything's cool. And I appreciate that. That's what I'm saying. Just do something. I'm not saying you have to solve world hunger or you have to solve racism by yourself, but by the church, Big C Church, being quiet about it, that shows either you're complicit or you just simply don't care.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you would say that, because I think, as individual people, sometimes we can feel a little powerless. Well, I can't change the inequality in the prison system, or I can't change, but each of us does have control over our own life and over our own relationships. And all it takes, think about like the one person so there's been one person here, one person there who's changed the world or who's changed a nation just by doing that one thing. And so I think, like, for me, the way that where I've landed, I want to use my voice. I do want to use my voice. And I think that's even like why we're making this video. But also, like, the kind of love that God has is a kind of love. It's different from what we see in the world. Like, love in the world is very much like, I'll use you to my advantage. I love you, but it really just means I want you or whatever. But like, God's love is, your enemies are my enemies. Like, I am with you. Like, I am for you. I am. So like, if we love our Black brothers and sisters, we are going to have that kind of love for them. Like, me as a white person, or even, our Native American brothers and sisters, whatever, you know, whatever culture they're from, but like we need to stand with them. We need to take a stand. We need to that kind of love. Like we need to love differently. We need to love from the heart. And I think that's kind of what I am taking away from what you're saying, Tim.
I'm gonna steal that. We need to love differently. By the way, I'm totally stealing that.
Just make sure you put by Elisa Berry. No, just kidding.
I will totally.
It's a new hashtag. It's a new hashtag, Tim.
You can own it. That's fine.
Well, I know one thing that we talk about in our community is that small is significant, and I think that like you were saying, Elisa, like it can feel really overwhelming to see injustice and feel like the only outlet is to like try to reform like these major issues in society, forgetting the fact that like we have a tremendous opportunity just right where we are, like right where we have been planted by God, right where we work and where we play and where we go and shop at the grocery store. Like I think that if people in the church individually could get a vision for how much impact they actually have in their own little areas of influence, I think we could really make a lot of change, because it's, I feel like a lot of change, at least in my life, has been when some person has poured into me individually, you know, as opposed to, you know, some policy that's changed here or there. I'm not saying that those policies aren't important and we shouldn't support, you know, those types of issues. I don't think it's an either or. It's like a both and. It's like, as we're advocating for these large issues, let's not forget like the ability that we have as individuals to change the lives of those around us.
Right.
Can I say
I agree, Matt. Go ahead, Lisa. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was just gonna say that we reached out to some people who are African American in our town. Like I said, there's not a lot of people in our town, so we're kind of curious. We reached out to them. We're actually making friends with them. They're amazing people, but they have really struggled, you know, during this time. Like really struggled, because people in rural America are not always kind. And I have seen things on Facebook that I grieve over. I have seen things like on the Facebook forums that I'm just like, I can't believe people are posting it. And my friends are here reading this. They're sitting there reading this, you know? So that's just makes them feel even more. So I just want to like put my stake in the stand, like, you know, no, I'm with this person, you know. So sorry if
I think that means more to you know, your African American friends, your Native American friends, Asian friends. I think it means more to them than you even know. It's interesting. I'm giving you a little bit of insight into my life. I have a lot of white friends, as you know, and it's probably because I was in the Marine Corps. But even before then, I had one of my best friends when I was in grade school was a white guy. His name was Michael Martin. He moved away. I think his parents were. I won't say anything, but I think there was some racial issues there. You know, white kid, black kid, and you know, we sort of drifted apart. And even now, matter of fact, fun fact, I'm going to Wisconsin to visit another one, a white friend of mine. I went there a couple years ago, and I told this to one of my other black friends, and he sort of chuckled like, why would you go to Wisconsin? I was like, I have friends in Wisconsin. He's like, man, I bet you and your family doubled the population of black people in Wisconsin. and I was like, you know what, you're probably right. We did see one other black person in Wisconsin that weekend, so we were like, hey, you know, so it was great. So I guess I said that to say it means more to your friends that you stand with them than you ever know. And I know my white friends, they stand with me It's funny. The only time I'm calling them my white friends is like in this forum. Like
Yeah.
it's never a, hey, this guy's a white dude or that guy's a black dude. It's we're just friends, man. Our kids play together. Our wives know each other. It's not even like that. We don't even see race. And again, it's probably a function of the Marines. And I'm probably talking out of line here, but I think that the Marine Corps does a great job at brainwashing its recruits. And I think I have the right to say that because I served over 20 years as a Marine. When we got there, the first thing that they did to us was shave our heads, take our clothes off, and make us all the same. They stripped our identity back to exactly what the author is saying, to one blood. We were all one color. We were not allowed to say Matt's white or Perry is Hispanic. We're never allowed to say that. We're all green, literally. So they took away white, black, Hispanic, Native American. They took all of that away and said, you're all green, period. And I think that has allowed me to sort of navigate this very uncomfortable place that we're in life. But to your point, Elisa, your friend didn't get that training that I got. So they're going to respond to different scenarios a lot different than I would. When Matt called me, he was like, hey, how are you doing? I was like, I'm good. But the person next to me was not good. And I had to be, empathetic to be like, okay, hey, man, it's going to be all right. It's not that big of a deal. But to them, it really is a big deal. So just by you standing with your friends, it means more to them than you know.
That's good.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. Tim, I know we've covered a lot of ground, and is there anything else that was sort of on your mind or on your heart to share that we haven't covered?
Man, I think you guys did a great job, man. I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, I really appreciate you guys for doing this, for reaching out, for letting your voice be known, especially in a time like this, when it may not be popular to speak out against some things that are going on. But I can't think of any other time in the history of this nation where this is absolutely needed. So you guys are front runners in this stuff, man. So, I'm not saying brag about it, but what I am saying is you guys are doing something that none of my other white friends are doing. So I really appreciate what you guys are doing. I really respect you. So let me know how I can be a part of whatever you guys are doing, and I'll do my very best to support you.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, I really feel like as the people of God, we have such an opportunity to change the conversation and to inject honor and respect, and even in Facebook conversations and stuff, to be able to just be a voice that is that's just different. I think I just want to close maybe just with one verse from the Bible that I think is really relevant, and it's from Romans, the book of Romans, and it says, love one another with brotherly affection and outdo one another in showing honor. And I think that as Christians, we are given permission to really try to almost be a little competitive and like try to outdo one another in honor. And like, this doesn't only apply to this issue of racial or ethnic injustice, but especially in this season, I think that we have an invitation by God to seek out ways to honor other people and be kind and be a voice that builds up and like recognizes the good in other people and sort of changes the conversation.
Yeah.
So that was just the last piece I wanted to get in there. So anyway, thank you all to those who have listened. Thank you, Tim, for taking time out of your evening, and we'll catch you guys all later.